This is not a time to be comfortable. This is a time that we're stretching. We have a bunch of data systems. They're very complicated. Unwinding that, making it something that's more streamlined, it's very hard to do. But if you can do that, the value is apparent. That's the story I want to tell.
Kevin Bates, the Chief Data Officer over at Rowe Price, brings over 2 decades of executive experience from Fannie Mae to one of the world's leading investment management firms.
When ChatGPT first popped up, it was sort of like, these tools are magical, you don't even need to worry about data quality, and it turned out to be almost the opposite. There's nothing magical here. It really is pretty existential.
What is the biggest risk for organizations who don't take data seriously?
It's a new generation of tools, and they are what all new companies coming up will be using as part of the standard package now. So if you can't adopt that, if you are impeded by your data, you're not going to compete.
And what's your bold fix?
You need a strategy for not only survival, but hopefully for winning. And that will be very much about your ability to
Welcome back to CEO Tech Live, powered by Hexaware. I'm your host, Ben Fanning, and I've got a treat for you today with our first three-time guest, Kevin Bates. Kevin, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Kevin is the Chief Data Officer over at Rowe Price and brings over 2 decades of executive experience from Fannie Mae to one of the world's leading investment management firms. Now joining us for a third appearance, of course, Kevin, welcome back, man.
Good to be here.
Let's do this.
Good to be here, sure.
So, what's broken in your industry and what's your bold fix?
Oh, that's such a big question. Well, let me jump in first to say I'm fairly new to my new industry, the asset management investment advice industry. Rowe Price, obviously a big market leader in that space, tenured a 90-year-old company.
90 years.
In my roughly 1 year, I haven't even quite been there a year. What I've really seen, and I think it is sort of a combination of factors contributing to this, but I've seen a massive fragmentation of data that is the lifeblood of these companies.
Yes.
Their ability to effectively build new solutions, navigate how to compete in an ever-increasing kind of more competitive environment has been really stymied by their ability to use data, collect data, make sense out of it. Of course, we've all heard about AI and all the new tools and solutions coming in. So our industry is really going through kind of an inflection point, or sort of a transition from, in some ways, a business that has operated as it did for maybe 80 years to one that really needs to be technology-driven and AI-driven and data-driven. And so right now, that transition, I think, is the most critical thing many of us can do.
And I suspect it's not just your industry. You're seeing this across multiple industries?
Well, so I see that really, I'd say, the industry I'm in is particularly sensitive to the quality and timeliness of data, but yes, that's consistent across all the different industries. One interesting aspect of what we're going through in sort of investment advice industry is a continued compression of fees and a continued ability of some companies to take more of a broader indexing kind of approach to investing that has over many years, over 7 to 10 years, contributed to sort of a need to reinvent yourself and a need to figure out ways to kind of, more effectively.
And a lot of companies, not just your industry, are facing legacy data. Like, I mean, you said Rowe Price has got 90 years,
90
right?
years,
Which is amazing.
Yes.
That you've got leadership, you've got vision for that long a period, but you've got data, maybe not 90 years old, but it's been around a long time. Well, maybe, right? It happens because in the financial industry, it's regulated. There's a lot of stuff to keep up with. So what's your recommendation to leaders who are facing legacy data that's been accumulating for years, and they're being dragged or forced into the world of AI where this data may determine the future of the company?
Well, I think you definitely have to learn to, walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, or however they say that. I think that there is an absolute need to address what we call the legacy estate. There are mainframes, there are systems that are very brittle, and in many cases they're 30 years old and they have become entrenched in everything that is being done at the company. to such a degree that these brittle systems, as you're trying to make changes, they are affecting very quickly your portfolio managers or the folks that are on the front lines really trying to drive business.
And next day effect, right? You change one thing, something breaks.
It could be immediate, it could be the next day, it could be a month later when some cycle runs. So the legacy estate is real, it cannot be ignored, and that is rough going. That is shoveling coal, coming up with transformation strategies to really line up how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna make these transitions away from the legacy tool. That's one part of the job, and you really cannot ignore it, and it's difficult. I think one mistake folks make is this is back to the walking and chewing bubblegum, is to overly focus on legacy, and we can't do this because we need to work through the legacy challenges. That is a long period of time to work through, transforming a mainframe or looking at a completely fragmented data ecosystem and starting to think about how to make it more coherent and more ready for AI. In parallel to that, we have to be experimenting with the new tools. We have to be thinking of ways to move quickly to see if these are even the right approaches for us to take and if they're really going to lead us in the direction the business needs to go. And so I think finding the balance between those two things is the most important role of senior executives that are looking at that problem.
So having fought this battle at Fannie Mae and now at Rowe Price, how much of your mental capacity do you spend on the legacy estate versus the future with AI? Because a lot of leaders are probably listening right now and they're like, oh yeah, a big company like Fannie Mae or Rowe Price, you have the luxury of spending all of your time thinking about the future. But it sounds like the legacy estate that you're talking about.
Right.
Is
it's a tale of kind of two different companies at two different times. At Fannie Mae, I had the wonderful opportunity to spend probably 10 years really working on the data strategy, how to clean up the legacy systems, how to position ourselves really clean. At that time, we were positioning ourselves to go to the cloud. We were very focused on having single, authoritative systems for data, being clear about which systems those are and which they aren't, and kind of how to transform so that folks are using data from the right place with data quality that is intentionally kind of implemented. And so that set us up, I personally believe, very well moving into the AI world, because if you remember when ChatGPT first popped up, a few years ago, it was sort of like, these tools are magical. You don't even need to worry about data quality. They're going to figure all that stuff out for you. These problems you've been working on for 10 or 15 years go away because they're so powerful. And it turned out to be almost the opposite, which is, they are incredibly powerful, but they need really good data. And so if you're behind on that, that's where you end up having to invest a lot of your mental capacity, to your point. So at Fannie, I feel like we had the benefit of the timing. Moving into Rowe Price, all the ingredients are there. We're already in the cloud. There's a different order of events that have occurred at Rowe Price, such that there is definitely going to be a focus on how to kind of make a more coherent landscape, how to make the data ready for AI. And that's a partnership with the business-aligned technology teams around what they need to move quickly on, so that we can prioritize from the legacy side to make sure that they're getting what they need. And in the backdrop, you continue to have transformation of your legacy, your broader legacy challenges, and you just have to pair these two things up and balance them. You can't say, I'm going to do 20% here, 80% there. It's sort of like 100% on everything, and figure out how to develop two personalities of your organization that can work together, one focused on one and one on the other.
That's got to be a common problem right now for all tech leaders. If you had to break your calendar down today, what's the split?
For me, I would say the split is roughly 40-60, and you could, given day, it could flip back and forth. But I'd say 40% on legacy, 60% on forward-looking. I think the forward-looking is very existential. You really have to be there. So whatever it takes to get solutions out that make sense as quickly as possible in the new, you sort of have to prioritize that above the legacy. But the legacy will be this risk and this anchor you're dragging along behind you.
CEO tech leaders right now have all got to be facing this thing, thinking about the legacy state and the future.
Right.
And I'm thinking, what's your advice for them in talking to their teams about it? Because I can see there's a lot of frustration building between, they're reading the Wall Street Journal. They want to be thinking about the existential challenges, but they can't leave the bread and butter behind, the legacy. Like, what's the coaching that you give your team and sort of helping these aspiring leaders that are coming ahead?
Well, it's very relevant because I spend a lot of my time doing that. That's a little bit of the transformation we're going through now. We do really have to emphasize that this is not a time to be comfortable. This is a time that we're stretching and that we may be uncomfortable with that. We're competing with companies that don't have this legacy estate, that are coming in able to move much more quickly without dragging a lot of work behind. So you have to be committed to the problem statement, which is that this is the problem statement. You have all the ingredients of success. You have the 90 years of experience. You have a very deep business capability. But you have to enable that business by ultimately being able to develop solutions efficiently. And the legacy is often like the real impediment to doing that. So first, I think recognizing the problem. This is a bit of the change management story, the ADKAR, if you will. Acknowledge that.
What are we trying to do here before we start going off, creating more data, more reports, more meetings? Whoa. Take a step back. What's the problem statement? So is it when you're thinking about the problem statement, are you thinking about like what's the pain, the biggest cost strain, the biggest opportunity? Like what's the grounding question?
In our case, it's what does our business need and why is that hard? Why is that a problem? Why have they maybe been asking for something for 2 or 3 years and there's not been enough progress? And then you quickly get to that conversation around, well, a lot of teams will feel that have been fighting this fight for a while that we have these legacy things, and if we don't get it over the hump, we're just never going to do it. And you sort of have to emphasize that, you're going to have to do both. And so there are techniques to do this. One could be to kind of split teams a bit between teams working on legacy stuff, teams working on the new. Eventually, those two things have to come together. And so it is a challenge I think everybody has. Everybody I've spoken to also, I think, very quickly in the AI adoption domain, it's about the data, it's about data quality, it's things that, like I say, some companies have not invested in. So,
what is the biggest risk that you see for organizations and leaders who don't take data seriously in the age of AI?
Well, I mean, I think it really is pretty existential. If you're not able to leverage these new tools, there's nothing magical here, right? It's a new generation of tools that could look like magic. They're very powerful. And they are what all new companies coming up will be using. They are what a lot of our the hyperscalers or the really big companies out there in terms of the software providers are pushing out the door as part of the standard package now. So if you really can't adopt that, if you are impeded by your data to the degree you really can adopt, you're not going to compete. And so I think ultimately it is just, if you want to compete, you have to get on top of your data.
So you can't survive.
And you can't survive. You need a strategy for not only survival, but hopefully for winning. And that will be very much about your ability to leverage your data.
Why don't more companies have more chief data officers? You've been specifically as a data officer for a long time. Before it was cool to some degree, but still, it doesn't seem like this role exists. When you talk about the importance of this role, why especially large organizations need this kind of role, how do you talk about it to the other CEOs?
Okay, well, and that gets a little personal because I have my own personal brand and my beliefs on this, which may not be the same as broader industry. You're right that I've been in the role for a while. In both cases at Fannie Mae and now at Rowe Price, my feeling is data quality, operations, how you're just managing data day to day is very important. But what you need in a chief data officer is a transformation and execution-oriented leader. You need somebody that's very technical, that's driving the agenda, and where you can really point to the value you're delivering. And I think a lot of organizations have been either they're not able to frame that, or they have a chief technology officer that does all of that already. There's a lot of different reasons, but there is a version of the role that is more oriented towards business, analytical, decision support, like not really driving the transformations that are underlying. And I think those are often more difficult kind of roles to maintain, because where's the value? How can you show that you added value at the C-level to the management committee, to the board? I think it's a lot more, honestly, I think folks resonate more with, we have a bunch of data systems, they're very complicated. Unwinding that, making it something that's more streamlined and enabling us faster, that's the story I want to tell. And it's very hard to do, but if you can do that, I think that folks will, the value is apparent, right?
I think it's powerful and it's funny because I've seen this is our third conversation. Yeah. And the first time, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Chief Data Officer, wow. And now it's like, of course. Yeah. Because I think what people maybe don't understand is that when you walk into the room and you're in a room with a bunch of your peers or other leaders across the organization, and you have a C title, you get invited to key meetings, you're at those key stakeholder conversations, and if you believe data is the future and it's a competitive advantage, right? Having a C-level leader champion that gets you included, right? And gets that topic on the table.
I think often it is really a company wants to demonstrate that they take this very seriously, that they are focused on data and they recognize it. The way you just described it, I'd say any management committee will absolutely agree that it's important, it's an impediment to things they want to do, it is an ingredient in their success. The real key is for the person in that role to have a good story around how they're actually addressing this. And
to make it tangible.
Hand-wavy, it needs to be tangible and it needs to be credible. And so
what do you do to make it tangible to the board when you walk in?
I think, well, first I do think, and I've been reminded of this recently, you have to listen and really hear folks and what they're saying their challenges are.
Yes.
I think that's a common mistake, that you come in with a playbook of what it means to run a data program and you're not really listening, because you sort of feel like there's education on both sides, which may be true, but especially if you're newer into the role or to the company, you have to demonstrate that you're listening. I think focusing on very tangible outcomes that are, we talked a little bit about the legacy versus kind of new. You need to be able to, in a matter of weeks or maybe 6 weeks or something, deliver new prototypes of solutions, AI tools, show how it's working. You need to be able to do that quickly. You need to be able to overlay on that sort of a longer transformation period for things that are harder and will take time to unwind. And so that has to be tangible. It has to be kind of written down. I think management committees, what resonates with them often is a roadmap that shows what you're going to do. What doesn't resonate often is another, sort of practice leader that's sort of talking in platitudes and that kind of thing. So I try to be, as much as I can, no nonsense, execution oriented. I feel like that really bridges the divide, and it gives sometimes business folks that don't want to have to also do that job, it gives them some confidence somebody's on it that's not just kind of talking, that they have a real agenda.
Yeah, I would say that's always been an important leadership skill, but maybe even more important today because data and AI can look conceptual.
Yes.
But to make it real, people can understand it.
Right.
That's the art.
And that's been over the last 3 years very interesting, because it did start off as this magical thing that was out there. What does it mean? How does it work? And there's been a lot of different attempts a lot of us have made at how to kind of balance of education and then what does this tool really mean to the business and how's it going to, and I'm still in industry finding folks haven't really figured it out. How to really show the value delivery is still a big challenge for a lot of companies, but the tools are relevant and they're making us faster and they're allowing us to have efficiencies in places. But those big bang kind of new, here's how our business is transformed because of AI and we couldn't do this before. A lot of that's still kind of work in progress.
On a lighter note, what is the most useful, what's the most useful way that you have used AI recently in your personal life that's been helpful?
Well, I mean, I think in general, in my personal life, and
Assuming the data was good.
yeah, well, the data is often amazingly good because it's sourcing from the whole world, you know, and a lot of times if you just look at where it's sourced from and make a few tweaks in your prompt, you can get amazing results. So, kind of spans the gamut of summarization of a lot of information into a clean agenda that I could follow. I've had that with recent events like a wedding event or other things like where the tool. It's not even that you're using an AI technique. It's that the tools we use today to open up a file just immediately are using AI to deliver that to you. I think we've all seen in our personal world just when you Google something, you're now getting a Gemini answer, and it is cross-referenced and in many cases, much richer answer to a question. And so things like, sorry, I'm taking it down the heavy path again, but it's really democratized prompt engineering because like I've explained to folks in my family, what you're doing where you ask the question and then you tweaked it a little to get more kind of the answer you wanted is prompt engineering. And that has really just gone from a concept 18 months ago to everybody's now doing it. My grandma's doing it because she Googles things.
So we're learning as we're going.
So we're learning as we're going. It's not like, oh, I'm going to use AI to do something fancy, but you know.
How did it help you plan a wedding?
Well, so I didn't plan a wedding. I was on the receiving end of a large amount of itinerary information, and I was able to summarize it all very crisply. So that the summarization capability is super powerful. I think a lot of folks are using in their everyday lives a combination of summarization and kind of retrieval augmented generation, where they're able to take a lot of content, come up with something new from it, like a set of PowerPoint slides, or to summarize something down into a very distilled list. So
we don't have to depend on the data being super easy to understand. We can get it in different ways.
The tools, depending which tools you're using, they're remarkably capable of that. Yeah.
Well, so last question.
Okay.
What does the Kevin Bates leadership legacy look like?
The Kevin Bates Leaders of Legacy?
No, leadership legacy. What does the Kevin Bates leadership legacy look like 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
Yeah. I think the gray hair, like evokes that question.
Not your personal appearance. We're all going to be a little more aged in 20 years.
I've had some opportunity to think about that. I think that's one of the powerful things about making a career transition is that you take stock. I do think ultimately we're here to do hard things together. The elements working in a corporate environment, it's just like anything else. It's all about the people. And so when I look back over, let's say 10 years, 15 years at Fannie Mae, and then now a year in at Rowe Price, I see the same thing, which is it's about really identifying the people that can get things done, that are great to work with, that inspire each other, cultivating that and helping leaders kind of along their journey. And so I think my legacy will always be defined by the leaders that were part of my teams along the way. We helped each other get that big project done. Kevin got out of the frying pan for whatever. Folks found new skills they didn't know they had, abilities to scale that they didn't know they had, and that's sort of the partnership between management and the folks that you bring up along the way. And so the legacy will always be looking back at the lives that you've touched and how they've thrived. They're now thriving in new levels at the level I was at or whatever, and it's all because it's all about the people and the relationships.
Yeah, let the record show the chief data officer, his legacy's not the data.
Legacy's not the data. You can't bring it with you. I think those relationships really power you forward, even when you hardly talk to those people. Once some project's over another, there's so much goodwill that's created. And it has to be anchored around getting stuff done. That's what we're here to do. It's what and I think everybody. We started earlier with what is my advice to folks? It's always acknowledge the problem statement. Listen, understand what you've got to get done here, and then let's do it. Let's go figure out how to do it. And when you find the right people and the teams coming together to be much greater than the sum of the parts is sort of what happens. There's a lot to that, but that's always, when I think about legacy, I think about the people and the process we build together. Yeah.
It's been a fun one today, Kevin. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we'll get you on for number 4 soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.